it was supposed to do that automatically, and I just started recording. So I'm sorry about that for folks that are watching the recording and it's showing midstream. Sharon's going to continue her talk.
Great. And so this outdoor learning model is not something new. It's in fact something that's more than 100 years old, as John was mentioning at the beginning. There's historic precedent for having school open during a pandemic, using the outdoors as the asset that makes that possible. During the Spanish flu and the tuberculosis epidemic, about almost exactly 100 years ago, these are images from that time of schools that just simply took their furniture from the inside and brought it out. So the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative is organized along, it's organized into 10 working groups with an 11th one that's a community of practice. And overall, the 10 working groups are collaborating on producing what amounts to an online how-to manual, so that if a school or district is interested in moving classes outside, and their next question is, how do we move classes outside? We are building the answers to those questions in an organized way on the website with hundreds of qualified professionals in many, many different fields. And so each of the working groups around the outside of this ring have been working somewhere between, some of them started up 10 weeks ago and some are more recent, I would say, but they are all producing materials that will be free, downloadable, short answers to frequently asked questions. They'll be put on our website. Some are already up, but the rest should come online in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And we hope that these materials will help as many schools as possible go outside. The 11th group is a community of practice for schools and districts and their collaborating partners to talk directly to one another. It's a group that wasn't waiting for the manual to come out and is forging ahead right now. And they've been having a great conversation, and we invite you to join us if you're from a school or district team. And it's a great place to swap stories of the process of how this is happening. So this is an image on the left of the navigation page of our website, which has some of this content available now and which will have more in the future. And the short link is on the bottom. It's also at greenschoolyards.org, and then look at the COVID tab. One page I want to draw to your attention, I'm going to focus on now, is the outdoor infrastructure planning tab. And it looks roughly like this, with different information about how to begin to think about your own school site and where classes would go and how they would sit. And so one place to begin is to download a copy of the outdoor seating chart and think about, there are other configurations too, like picnic tables that this doesn't include yet, but it shows an example of how you might fit various half class size groups of students in a given outdoor seating area 6 feet apart. And we're using the half class size because that's what we've heard many schools are doing. And we also, these diagrams show that it takes about 18 feet square or in a grid, or maybe 26 feet in a diameter in a circle, to be able to get 15 people gathered outside. And you really want to keep the gathering space smaller than about 20 or 25 feet in diameter if you can, because the teacher's voice is difficult to carry beyond that, and you might need amplification, like a tour guide microphone, those little, that small mics that you can easily get. But beyond, you definitely need them for bigger seating arrangements. So first, thinking about what kind of seating and how much space it takes up. So we're using that 20 to 26 foot range in the images you'll see that follow. We have a campus assessment tool that you can download so that you can work through with individual school principals and their community about what is it that, that they would need for their own school. It asks, for example, how many kids are coming back, in which grade levels, how many different outdoor seating areas would you have as a goal? Would you like 25% of the school to sit outside? How many classes would that be? How big are they? What are the overall outdoor learning goals that the school is seeking? And things like what types of spaces might be available. And so to walk through that from a graphic perspective, here are a few kind of thought experiment examples in different climates. The first one here is from Southern California, where the environment is very hot and dry. And this is a picture of their campus which has about 550 students in grades K-5. They have 28 classes, and they are planning to have half class sizes outside. It's a suburban location on 9 acres, and they have 18 separate buildings with exterior hallways. So all of the classes open directly to the outside with their own direct doors. The school is not close to a park or other open space. They often have temperatures over 100 degrees, and the weather doesn't really cool down until October. And the Santa Ana winds blow incredibly strongly in October, so they are thinking that they would, for them, the suitable outdoor conditions probably start in late October, early November, and would go through the rest of the school year. This is what some of the images of the schoolyard look like. And we can see on the bottom left that the school, these were pictures from Google Street View. And on the bottom left, you can see that there's a small collection of chairs and a table outside, as it's their normal class practice to take some small group meetings outside. And so they do this already to have portions of the classes outside. We noted that they have huge solar panel arrays in their parking lots as well, which provide a lot of shade. And they have some trees around, but really the campus is wide open and flat and not all that shaded. So in this example, we went through and figured, and we're thinking about if they had a low cost scenario and they wanted to think about what they already have that they could use, where would you situate classes underneath existing shade, and how big would those be? And so here, what you're seeing are the circles are the 26-foot class groupings that I showed earlier. And some of the rectangles are a quarter size of a class. It would only fit 7 students at a time. But each of their buildings has a shady side of the building. And the idea with those rectangles is that the classes, if the school were to accommodate half their population on campus each day, half of that population could sit outside and half could sit inside in this model. The windows are such that the teachers feel like they could supervise kids half inside and half outside, giving everybody more space. And they also have a few existing picnic areas in this location and this location that are sheltered and with benches, and the other locations are drawn to take advantage of existing shade. So all they would need to do is bring seating to those places. In this model that involves small scale investment, the thinking with the yellow bars is that they would add retractable shade awnings to their building so that they could roll out more shade on what is already the shady side of the building, extending that shade pocket from about 10 feet wide to maybe more like 20 feet wide. And that would let them put half a class underneath the shade on the shady side of the building. And that would be a lot more comfortable, say, than sitting in the parking lot where it's pretty hot. And for the parking lot seating, I should say too, that the idea was that they would close off that parking drop-off area to traffic during the school day with barriers that would be at the entrances there. So in scenario 3, which is more their ideal scenario, they took out the idea of considering, in this case, the ones under the solar panel on the parking lot. The asphalt there, they thought made it too hot even with the shade that was being cast by the panels. And so they looked at where it would be optimal, classes spread out so they couldn't hear each other, and with a space for every classroom. And so in this plan, 481 kids could sit in 34 seating areas with 28 spaces for half a class and 6 spaces for small group work. And so if only 50% of the kids are on campus every day, every class could be held entirely outside if they wanted to be in these locations. And if 100% of the kids were to return to campus, 50% could be inside in the class and the other 50% could potentially be outside in this arrangement. Okay, so that was climate example number 1. In this second example, this is from the San Francisco Bay Area where the climate is more temperate and stable year-round. And this is a school that has 225 students in 9 classes. It's a very small school community. They have a lot of building space and a lot of land for that population. It's in an urban location on just under 5 acres. And it also has an adjacent 4.7 acre park right next door that's owned by the city. The campus has 3 buildings that are interconnected by interior hallways. And they have pretty good weather most of the year, with a few rainy weeks in the winter, a few cold weeks as well, and strong winds, and right now fire season, which makes things more challenging as well. So here are some pictures of what the campus looks like in this context. They have some existing outdoor seating under the trees and in their school garden space, and the bottom two pictures are from the adjacent park next door. And so in the first scenario, we were pretty easily able to find 9 places for their 9 classes to sit outside, some in existing areas and some that they would need to add more picnic tables or seating to create. They can use a lot of their picnic tables and seat walls and log rounds and benches. They would add a few more tool sheds, and this would still preserve enough space for PE and recess and whatever else they wanted to do outside. So with this scenario, if 50% of the school returned, that 50% could sit outside, or 50% could sit outside and 50% could sit inside. In this scenario too, we haven't erected tents over those circles. They're just the place that the classes would sit. So in this example, in the second part, we were thinking about where would the other half of the school sit if you wanted 100% of the kids to come back and be able to sit outside. And so here we've modeled the other half sitting outside in the park next door, which would logistically not be super complicated because the kids could just walk a little bit further right next to their school. They could potentially deliver lunch to the park. There's bathrooms in the park. And so they could sit tucked under the trees in most cases and just have school there. And of course, if they wanted to have more shade or rain protection, they could put tents up, but that's so few weeks, usually in our climate, that it might not be necessary. Okay, and the third example here is from Northern Virginia, right just outside of DC, in a school that has 828 kids in grades K-5, and they have 33 K-5 classes and 6 preschool classes on site. And it's in a suburban location on almost 13 acres. They have 2 buildings and they have interior hallways, and they are adjacent to 2 busy streets within a quiet neighborhood. They have 4 distinct seasons. They have a real winter, and at least compared to California. And they have light snow. They get a fair amount of rain, and it's year round. And so tents would be really helpful in this location. And let's see. So when you look around their campus, the first thing to do is to look for spaces that are already possible to put classes in. So they have a lot of resources in that type of, with that type of thinking, a lot of trees with expansive canopies that the classes could tuck themselves under, a lot of flat spaces that are easy to put up picnic tables. They have a few existing outdoor classrooms tucked into the woods on site with tree rounds as simple seats and some picnic tables. They have a lot of flat asphalt, both on their schoolyard and in huge parking and driving areas on site. So when we looked at the site, first we saw that that for their plan A, what would a low cost scenario look like? What if we just put outdoor classrooms in the places that cost the least? And so this is a model of that. It shows where you could put 207 kids in 14 seating areas, which would have a capacity of 25% of their enrolled students. 14 of the 39 classes could be served this way with very little cost, using what they already have and adding a little bit of seating and maybe a couple of storage sheds as well. In the second scenario, we thought because of the frequent rain, they really would be better off if they had at least a tent over them. And so in this picture, each of those outdoor seating circles is shown with a yellow shade around it or over it, the tents, to show where that it would be important to shade them and to protect them from the rain primarily. And we found with a little bit more investment that they could put 32 outdoor seating areas around their school, which would allow 32 of the 39 classes to have an outdoor space to meet. And this of course would cost more because you would have to install tents on each location and provide seating or other means to sit outside. And then to complete the thought experiment, we were wondering too, if you wanted the entire school, every class to have an outdoor space, where would you put the last few? And in this example, we've chosen to put them on the far left there, which is next to a busy road. So we're calling this the infrastructure investment scenario, because there isn't now a fence between the road and the forest, and there would need to be if there were students there regularly. And they also would have to clear a little bit of the forest to make more clearings for the kids to sit in their classes. So this is, but in this model, they could indeed get either 50% of the if 50% of the students were on class every day, that each class, half of each class could sit outside. Or sorry, if 50% were on campus each day with a small class for every class, they could all be outside. And if they had 100% of children on site, half could be in the classroom, half could be outside. And so taking this example a few steps further into the next steps of the planning process. So this map shows the same three scenarios I just showed you, the lower cost, the medium cost, and the higher cost one. And we've colored them with the easiest being green and the more investment being yellow and the higher investment being red. And then there was some analysis done on those classes to look at what types of resources do they have? Are they on grass or asphalt? Are they shaded or do they need shade? Different features of each site were noted and they're color coded to match the chart. On our website, we have a cost estimate chart that you can download that has examples of all different types of potential outdoor seating and shelter and hygiene and materials that teachers might want outside. And we looked up online the range of costs for all different kinds of things. And so schools can go through and put in their own vendors, looking to see if they fit within the expected range of cost for those items. And then this chart will help you calculate out what that would be at scale if you need 10 classrooms of this kind of seating and 5 tents of this type, things like that. So our outdoor infrastructure working group is about to produce about at least 30 documents that relate specifically to thinking in more depth about seating and shelter and weather. And they will be online in the next probably month. But here are just a few examples of what those seating and shelter looks like. But also thinking alternatively, what if you don't have or need to have permanent infrastructure? What other direction could you take? And so we've been considering mobile equipment as well. Think of it as a go bag or an individualized supply that makes kids comfortable sitting outside. So if every child had, for example, a backpack or a tote bag that could carry a water bottle and a seat cushion and a clipboard, pencils and a sun hat, sunscreen, weather appropriate clothing, notebooks, hand sanitizer, then there would be no need for a staff member from the school to clean shared materials. Essentially, all the kids are carrying their own materials, and they're also portable. So they could take that set to a local park. They could take it to sit under their own trees, and that makes their seating modular and portable. And I think there are some districts definitely pursuing this, and the things that they're sitting on might be a stadium seat cushion, or it might be, we've heard in a couple examples of a half of a yoga mat, for example, just to give each kid a place to sit. So in this case, the school would invest in these resources for their students to make sure everybody has them. And similarly, teachers also would need to have their own portable equipment. If they're on site, they might have a storage closet, but if they're going to the park and they can't have a storage closet, they might have a wagon if it's a really short distance. And that would also include similar items for the teacher, but it might also include a portable whiteboard, a folding chair, emergency contact information, and other materials that a teacher will need anytime they're off-site, first aid kit, things like that. And so what schools need is not only to think about the infrastructure, to think about the staffing. And so we're also working on staffing plans. But here's one case study from a school that we had talked with about what were they planning to do if they're going to split every class in half. The problem is not only one of space, but one of staff. Who's going to teach the other half? And so this was an example from an urban preschool to 5 public school in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they have low enrollment with 13 classes and 250 kids. Their school population particularly had substantial learning losses across the board, with kids that didn't log on or weren't able to get the support they needed in the spring. and the principal is very, very adamant about getting everyone back on site all the time from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to cover the childcare needs of the parents at home and to meet the kids' needs, both socially, emotionally, and also to catch up on the learning loss. And so she plans to try to reopen with 100% of students on site 5 days a week with space, and they have space for all of the classes to be entirely outside and all of the classes to be inside, spread out, which is also unusual. But in this format, the staffing that she's considering is having 4 days of normal curriculum and a 5th day of an enrichment wheel taught by outside partners to give the teachers a chance to plan together for the coming week. And so at this school, they have partnerships with non-formal education providers that are existing partnerships as part of their after-school program. And so that they're expanding the relationship with those organizations to help with before and after school care, recess supervision, and enrichment programming, so that the staffing is not changing all the time, so that they can keep a consistent staff and have them assigned to different groups of kids to keep the spread down to a minimum. And then the classes would be scaled into half-size classes with half taught by the classroom teacher and half by a paraprofessional teaching assistant who's assigned to the class. And then each class would have its own outdoor space and indoor space. And so this would be the model for the 4 days a week that they're doing academic instruction. And on the 5th day, that partner organization would be teaching the specialty wheel with more of art and music and movement classes and things along those lines. Okay, switching gears. So our website also has some materials to share that relate to planning school meals. And school meals are times when everyone will have their masks off to eat. And so it's particularly important to do that in a place where the airflow is good, and outdoors is pretty ideal for that. So even at schools that are not planning outdoor learning, it's great if they can move their meals outside and keep kids at least 6 feet apart when their masks are off when they're having lunch. And so there are some thoughts and links to that on our website under the school program integration part of the COVID-19 tab. We also have a section about recess and physical education, and it will be expanded soon to include nature play and free play types of activities. And for now, we have some great materials that our colleagues at Playworks shared. They have games and things that guides to games that they normally recommend schools play, and they have a resource that translates those for COVID time and things about spacing and shared materials. Okay, and now I have some pictures to show you of some outdoor classes in action, and from a partner of ours, Golistan Education, which is an independent nonprofit school based in El Cerrito, California. And these are pictures I've taken in the last month or two on their site. And so here's an example of the very first outdoor classroom, one of the very first outdoor classrooms they set up. It's really simple with some straw bales that I think they said were about $10 each. And they erected a shade sail above it, which they say ended up not working out. Shade sails like this pull pretty hard on the places that you attach them. And so the individual poles that were set up kept falling over, and it isn't great for the engineering of the structure. The structures that it gets attached to are under stress if you put a shade sail on a building or on a fence. And so they decided it wasn't ideal, and they don't have shade sails anymore, and they don't recommend them. Instead, they went to a couple of different tent structures, and this one in the foreground is the same outdoor classroom that now has a standard event tent over it that's been installed on the asphalt, and it hasn't been drilled in this case. Those big like 3-foot cubed structures, I believe, are cement footings that were placed there by the tent installer, and it's attached to those, and that's what anchors the tent onto their asphalt. Next to it, they have a little yurt set up. They have a preschool program, and they use the yurts, which they open up during the school day so that the top, pointed part of the top, just seems to float over the ground when it's open. This is another outdoor classroom on their site where they've just taken inside furniture outside. They had a lot of extra furniture that was in the school's basement, And so here's a little bit closer view of old furniture that they just moved outside, put under the tent, spaced the kids apart, and they just bought the tent, but the rest are resources that they had elsewhere in the school. So rule of thumb number 1 is use what you have first, so it doesn't cost you anything extra. Another view of that site, each of those desks are 6 feet apart. And in this, here they are again, and they're eating lunch, and in this case, preparing their own snack. The kids each prepared their own snack in this picture. Here's a shot of one of the yurts with the sides open for full airflow. They're just providing shade, and it makes a cozy room, and they have a tarp down on the ground with some wool rugs on it. Here they've just taken other benches to make an open air classroom example. These are situated next to a large garden that they have, so they have access to the green space and to the classroom possibilities that are next to it. Oh, and this garden was just built directly on the asphalt. All of it all has raised beds, and so this is an example of a conversion of what was a completely empty asphalt slab becoming an outdoor classroom space with a big garden in a short amount of time. And the straw bale edges, I think, were what they used to contain the wood chips that are in the middle of that garden. And their newest outdoor classroom just went up this week, and they've improved the design by adding shipping pallets on the bottom before they put their rugs down to keep them off the ground in case the ground gets wet. And then they've just installed some of these really cool outdoor seats that have their logs that have one log set at seat height, one log set at desk height, and a backpack hook from Bean and Stock Natural Playgrounds that can be reassembled after the COVID crisis, and those can be combined into an outdoor play structure or planting structure. So they're planning for reuse with those logs in particular. They also at Golistan make good use of umbrellas. This type of umbrella makes a small seating area for breakout space. It has to be rolled up and down because it catches in the wind, and even with rocks in the base, it's not incredibly stable. So it needs to be put up only on low wind days. But when you have it there, you can do things like this. They have an outdoor sewing station as part of their program. And so this was under another umbrella like that. On the main part of their campus, they're lucky to have classrooms where the entire wall is glass and can be rolled away, and each classroom has their own outdoor seating area, and this was part of the architecture of this part of the grounds, which was renovated just 2 years ago. All the part on the right was paved 2 years ago. But this is what those little spaces look like inside. The building has some shade already, and they're adding more with portable umbrellas that add a lot of color and pop and comfort to those spaces. And the kids, again, are sitting 6 feet apart in this preschool shot having lunch. And also you can see the indoor-outdoor nature of the space here. And I should say too that their classes have very, very small pods. Part of their safety protocol, which was reviewed by medical colleagues and drafted with their advice, requires them to have very small pods of kids. So kids are only exposed to each other within a very small cohort. And the protocol that Golistan uses is on their website and ours that you can look at, and we'll give you the link later, that will explain how their practices work. And it's been working well. They were open all summer. And here's just another shot of what that indoor-outdoor space looks like. So even their interior classrooms have very good air circulation. And then at recess, those small cohorts play. Normally all the kids have masks on, and they play in a nature play setting, and natural materials have the COVID virus has a very short lifespan on natural materials outside in the sun. And so they're not concerned about transmission on the materials. All the kids wash their hands frequently. They're all wearing masks, and they are kept in small cohorts. So moving on toward the end here, I wanted to add that the National Initiative has something called the Emergency Schoolyard Design Volunteers, and it's a program run by my colleague Claire Latenay, who's a professor at Cal Poly Pomona. And the materials we have online that I was just walking through are intended for schools to be able to use themselves. But if your school or district would like a thought partner from the design field to help you think about them and step through them to make an initial set of diagrams, this Emergency Schoolyard Design Volunteers program is set up to do that. We have more than 250 designers from around the country who signed up to help. And there's a link there that more designers can sign up to help. And then schools from around the country have also been signing up from, I think, 26 states so far to receive help. And we hope your school will join us in that as well. So please, we'll share those links again afterward. And then if you have a school or district that would like to be part of a cohort of early adopter schools and districts that are working on this and hear from your peers, we meet every other Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, and the next meeting is September 15th. The link to the working groups is on our website. And we also have all the other working groups I was mentioning. Some of them are just starting their work and some are farther along. You're welcome to join us in that conversation and contribute to the materials that are being shared. So, thank you.
Hey, John, I think I'm supposed to share my screen now, but it's telling me that I can't because the host has stopped it. Can you fix that?
Okay, I will let you share your screen. I want to thank Sharon. That was incredible. That was exactly what I was hoping to see. So many great, concise, yet thorough ideas. And just to remind folks, most everything that Sharon shared, as she said, is on their website. And that's what makes this type of work even better, that as they're gathering folks from across the country to put their heads together to figure out solutions and share solutions, it's all being shared on a website as fast as they can make it happen. Once again, it's a huge topic, so there's a lot that still hasn't been shared on the website, and it will be coming out in the days, weeks, maybe months for certain content. So return to that site and keep track of what the national COVID group is putting out at Green Schoolyards America. So we are going to let Whitney share her screen, and she's going to share about our Padlet and the questions that we have all shared during our registration process. We've kind of categorized those, and Whitney's going to share her screen and share how we're going to do the Q&A session. And then we will also verbally share some of these in addition to typing about these. So Whitney, I see your screen on our Padlet.
Okay, great. Yeah, ready for me to go?
Yep.
Awesome. So yes, I echo that. Thank you so much, Sharon. And as the person who was looking at the chat, there's a lot of thank yous in there too. This is incredible information. So what I've done is when people put questions into the chat, I added them to this Padlet. And what we're going to do is just take the next, just until noon, so the next 5 or 6 minutes, to give people a chance to jump in here. You can go in any order. You don't need to start at number 1, but take a look at these headings. And this is our chance to kind of do a group mind think and get our best ideas out there to share with one another, and also to generate a few questions for the wrap-up Q&A with Sharon and each other. So I'll just demonstrate for you how you can do this. So if you have a question like ideas for dealing with extreme weather in outdoor classrooms, if you want to add either an idea or a question, then you'll hit that little plus button and then title it, give it a keyword so that people can see what you're talking about. And then where it says write something, you can write in a question. What do I do about snow? And then as soon as you've got that in there, I'm going to ask you to sign it so that people know who you are, where you're from. And then that's there for people. And then if anybody has an idea, they can add right here where it says add comment. Or if anybody has another question, they can add another question like that. And we're just going to take, like I said, until noon to do this kind of quietly on our own. This is also a good little stretch break if you want it. And then at noon, we're going to come back together and discuss what was shared here and give Sharon an opportunity to answer some of these questions and give each other an opportunity to share out on those questions. If you have questions about what to do on this, you can put them into the chat and I'll respond there. But otherwise, just dive into the Padlet. The link is in the Zoom. John, is that the best way for them to get to the link?
Yep, they could either see it on their screen there, or I shared it twice in the chat.
Great, so you go to that website so that you can join into this Padlet, and then you can add information there. And at noon, we'll share back out. Thanks, everyone. All right. Thank you all so much for contributing ideas and questions to our Padlet. And we're going to take the last 15 minutes of this webinar to share out on these key questions and ideas. So the way this will work, I'll say a topic. I'm going to invite Sharon to share any thoughts she has on the questions that came up. And then while she's sharing, if any of you have something you'd like to share verbally, particularly a solution, if you've seen something that works that hasn't come up yet, if you can use the Zoom feature to raise your hand. So you just click where it says participants on Zoom, and then right next to your name, there's a little opportunity, or down at the bottom of that box of participants, there's an opportunity it says raise hand. And if you raise your hand, then John will know to call on you and unmute you, and you can share a question or thought on whichever topic we're talking on. So let's start on this. It looks like we'll have about 3 minutes for each of these columns. The first column is ideas for funding and budgeting. And Sharon, on here, we had a lot of questions about staffing, and if you have indoor and outdoor classrooms, what to do about staffing and how to fund that if you need more staff, and also funding for shade structures, or I imagine any kind of outdoor classroom structures. So Sharon, do you have anything to add on funding for staff or shade structures for outdoor classrooms?
That is a very good question, and I think it doesn't have a single solution. I think there are many, and none of them are probably fully sufficient, unfortunately, but I have heard of schools and districts turning to CARES Act funds that were infrastructure funding, mostly I think for COVID planning, and there are some that are choosing, instead of buying plexiglass dividers for the inside of the school, they're buying their outdoor classroom supplies with it. On the staffing front, I think there's some school districts that we've talked with that are finding it in their own budgets somehow to have additional staff, or to be able to contract with institutions that were employing non-formal education providers, rather than an individual school hiring directly 10 separate teachers. They were partnering with an institution that that had staff but wasn't fully engaged in this time because people can't visit them for field trips and such. And so setting up relationships between an institution and a district is helpful. I don't know precisely where those funds come from. I think that it varies, and it depends on local control funding formulas in different districts if they have it available, and it's challenging, definitely.
And I just want to add to that, this is John from Life Lab, that our district that we partner with most closely, Pajaro Valley Unified, is using CARES Act funding as much as we can understand. That's where it's coming from, to fund outdoor learning experiences with kids that are at risk of not succeeding in distance teaching. And they are partnering with outside organizations to provide that care. So we got a real life example, and there is funds to hire the people to do the work at school sites that are serving as satellites for multiple kids from different schools to join at pre-identified school sites for learning indoor and outdoor experiences.
Thanks, John.
I think it's also about reframing, like that, the budget somehow came up with money for computers, right? And so it's like, what is the priority? How can you reframe this as enough of a priority to be accessing budgets? I think it's part of it too.
Great, thanks, Sharon. Let's see, attendees, please use Zoom to raise your hand if you want to add something verbally for folks to hear on that topic. I don't see any. John, do you?
No, there's no one that has raised their hand giving out money yet.
Great. The number 2, ideas for dealing with extreme weather in outdoor classrooms. Sharon, I'll highlight that what came up here was looking for examples of places with really cold weather in actual seasons, and also outdoor clothing. And I tagged this in here even though it's not weather. Insects, what do you do about bees, mosquitoes, and ticks? So anything you'd like to add on those questions?
That we have resources that will be published in the next few weeks on all of those topics in a lot more detail than I can provide off the top of my head, but it basically, I think, falls into the categories of clothing and infrastructure, and very much is about I think what is cold is relative all over the country. We have schools in Maine and and Vermont that have helped us write the cold weather materials using practices that they already use. And they already, like for example, forest schools in those states with really cold winters have great solutions that they've been using for years. And so that's what's in the materials that are coming. And there's a school district in Maine that will have a case study up on our website shortly. I hope that they're planning to take a good portion of their K-12 classes outside and plan to stay there most of the winter. And we also have another example coming soon from Illinois, where a Waldorf school is already building shelters, and they're also planning to stay out for much of the year. In that case, they're an independent school and can shift their schedule a little bit, and they may take a longer winter break and go longer into the warmer season, like for the middle, absolutely bitter cold weather. And no one is suggesting that people or classes should stay out beyond what is medically importantly, like no one wants hypothermia, for example, but I've heard some schools in the Northeast use 10 degrees as the cutoff for when that they would want to have kids outside. And here from California, that sounds very, very dramatic, but I do, as a kid who grew up in Chicago, remember playing outside all winter, and we certainly were out in that temperature. And so they were saying too that they might switch the activities from sitting for your lesson to, like, you know, PE class, snowshoeing, or some other skiing that gets your blood moving. And it's not about sitting when it's that cold, it's about moving and doing. Yeah.
Great.
And definitely about having the right clothes and making sure every child is warm and dry.
Great, and thank you for sharing so many of these case studies on your website. It's exciting to know the details are forthcoming. Yeah. Let's see. Any raised hands? No, right? Okay. Number 3, tips and ideas related to laying out and design. Folks had follow-up questions about examples of low-cost materials. And happily, I want to just highlight to people that some participants put in suggestions there, which is great. And we'll be sharing this Padlet, so you have a chance to see those links. Specifics on rain shelters, and then the rest are kind of helpful comments on things that you already shared, I think. Oh, and hand washing outdoors, good hand washing stations. So rain shelters, low-cost materials, hand washing. Anything you want to add, Sharon, or attendees, feel free to raise your hands.
Just to emphasize too that the lowest cost material is something you already have. So the first thing is always looking for what the school has that can be used, whether it's benches are already outdoors, or furniture in the basement collecting dust, or things from the inside of the classrooms that could be moved out. And so that's the first place, what's free. And then second, like straw bales here anyway in California are about $10 each. Here we replace them twice a year, usually if it's outside, because they break down. There are other school districts that are looking at logs and of collaborating with urban arborists who take down trees, big trees, and asking to receive all their logs and giving them specs about how high they want them to be, and so that they will be the right size for seats. And so those would be free, and it costs the arborist money normally to get rid of the wood, so they're happy to not pay to dump it in many cases. So setting up those kinds of relationships. And then I think the mobile classroom materials, having a seat pad to move around like you'd bring to a stadium, or you'd have for camping chairs and things in different communities. Sometimes many of the kids will have something from home that they could bring in, and the school could just buy the ones that were needed to make sure everyone has one. Yeah, so that's where I would start for low cost materials, I guess. And on shelter, looking for the shade that you have to shade, and under trees and under overhangs. What else? Hand washing, super important. I mean, in addition to kids all wearing masks all the time, even when they're outside, washing your hands is very important. And so having plumbed sinks is nice if you happen to have that on the exterior of the building, but I think hand sanitizer, that's around 70% alcohol would be ideal. And so so I think whatever is available, that it happen often.
Thank you. All right, 2 last categories. One is around liability and agreements for teaching outdoors. People had questions about teaching in public parks and how to limit interactions between students and people not affiliated with the school. And then also questions here about if the outdoor classroom is outside of the security perimeter of the school, vandalism. And there are a couple questions in here about masks.
Yeah.
So anything you have to add on any of those topics that comes to mind?
Well, we have a parks working group that is producing materials that are about setting up relationships between parks and schools, and it's parks and also street closures. I mean, I think what we have in mind looks a lot like the restaurants that you may have seen having sidewalk cafes in your own city. And so some cities are coming forward and offering to their school districts to the same ability as they're giving the restaurants to close streets near them too. So if the school is not near a park, it may be an option to close a little used street for outdoor learning. And I think, what do you do outside the fence? I think it's similar to what, or even inside the fence. I think for inside the fence, it's because we have had that question as well about security of being out in your own yard. I think it's that schools would start looking at what they normally do for recess, and this is an extension of that. So whatever protocols they have for keeping kids safe at recess on the site and on a field trip is probably what they would do at a park. They might need some extra hands on deck at a park to supervise from afar the classes that are meeting in different areas, or they might strategically put the classes that have kids who are old enough to follow the rules a little more closely in the park classes, the ones that go down the street to the park, and then the younger kids that might be more prone to run on the school campus inside the boundary of the school. And so it's just thinking strategically about who leaves and who stays, and then the permission process there to go off-site would probably be a parent permission form that is similar to what a school would use for field trips, but extended for the time period so that parents would opt in to allow their kids to do that. It's different in every school, but that's what along the lines we're thinking, and the Parks Working Group will in the next month have some materials to share that help with those things. Because there's also joint use agreements and MOUs between parks and school districts that need to be figured out as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sharon, in your experience, are masks always worn in these outdoor classrooms? Does that vary?
Well, we had a health webinar yesterday, and the two doctors who are experts on COVID transmission said it's definitely recommended, highly recommended. They think masks should be worn inside and outside, and in both cases, kids should still stay 6 feet apart with masks on the whole day. And that the masking, hand washing, staying 6 feet apart from one another, and grouping your school into small pods that don't interact, so that the kids don't meet up scheduled so they aren't sitting close together is all important. And I'm happy to give you that link when it should be on our website shortly, the video from yesterday with the specific health advice.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, our last category here is about buy-in from teachers and schools. There are some great ideas here about really foregrounding teacher safety, because that is so important to teachers, students, and the community. So using that as an opportunity to get buy-in from teachers and teacher unions. There's a question that is very specific that you might be able to help answer, Sharon. It says, our school district has told us we cannot attach shade sails, have any structures within 20 feet of a building, or attach structures to the asphalt. These restrictions are attributed to the California State Board of Architecture. Are you aware of such restrictions? If so, what workarounds have you used?
Yeah, we'll go back to the first question too. I'll answer that one second, but the first one was...
the first one wasn't really a question, it was just people really saying, let's put teacher safety at the center.
Oh, yeah. Let me speak to that real quickly, actually. I think it's a really good idea if your school is on the fence about this. The first outdoor classroom you should set up is the teacher's meeting room, and have set up an outdoor classroom space that is intended as the place, if teachers are on site and need to talk to one another, that they can go to be outside and sit together in a safe way. And so that will also help them to move into this concept more comfortably. It's easier. I have sat in the ones at Golistan School that I was showing, and I've sat there with district colleagues from local school districts who were thinking about setting this up, and the act of sitting together outside with masks on 6 feet apart in that shady setting is really reassuring, and it feels good. And so it's a way that you can visualize it. So if you only are going to put in one, let that be the teacher's meeting space, so that they all get used to it, and so that you're protecting their health. And if you're protecting their health, then the kids' health will be protected as well. And those are ideas that my colleagues at Golistan School have put forward. I think they're excellent. And then the second question about California State Architect, it's the division of the state architect that that does manage the permits for all 10,000 schools in California. And Division of State Architect did just come out with updated guidelines about COVID, and there are structures that are permitted. If it's under 120 square feet and temporary, the school can put it up themselves. If it's bigger than that or longer than that, there are specific rules that require permits and DSA permission. And so we have, again, I have those documents now after much searching, and they'll be going up on our website too, on the guidance page. And they are, I'm not sure about the specifics, but basically they have to meet, California has earthquake codes as well as fire codes. You don't want to block exits from buildings. You don't want to block a fire engine's path onto your schoolyard if that's how the fire department defends the school in emergency. You don't want the structure to blow over in the wind or to drop something heavy on someone's head, right? So they're looking out for safety, and it makes a lot of sense. But it's also tough to find structures that are permitted. So we're trying to work with them directly and also to post the materials they have to help provide that. And it will be on the guidance page too.
Great. Thanks, Sharon. I want to acknowledge the time. It's 12:16. Or do you have about 5 more minutes to go through the remaining few questions? Great. The next question here is on classroom technology. If folks are using PowerPoints as part of instruction, have you seen examples of that happening outdoors?
Before we move there, Karen and Brooke have their hands raised.
Oh, great. Thank you, John.
So, Karen, I'm going to allow you to share your screen and your voice. And Brooke, I'm going to do the same thing. And we'll start with Karen if she's still on. She seemed to disappear. And then I'll try Brooke. So Brooke and Karen. Karen, if you're there, you could speak up first, and then Brooke. I don't see Karen anymore. And maybe they raised their hands a while ago and have left since.
Oh, sorry, John, can you hear me?
I see you, Karen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, this is Brooke, actually.
Okay.
I was just wondering, Sharon, if when we were talking about supply chain for all of this, just because I know we ran out of seeds very quickly in spring when we were doing distance learning, have there been any initiatives to contact outdoor manufacturing companies? So contacting, say, Patagonia, REI, Sierra Designs, and seeing if they can start making modified outdoor tents so that we have a huge supply of these structures that they could so easily make from their infrastructure they already have?
That is a good question. I don't know. I don't know of any efforts to ask them to make more supply. I do have heard some discussion of it would make sense that districts collaborate instead of competing for resources, make bulk orders together from places that can provide it. From some gear. I also have been hearing from some companies that they would welcome bulk orders or any orders because their business is down, the outdoor industry in general. I think with people are doing less, as field trips become less and schools are not using the vendors they normally use, a lot of the outdoor industry needs our business. We as a national initiative are trying not to call out specific vendors who are trying to be agnostic somewhat on what people pick, but we encourage you to look for materials that have value after COVID as well, that come from sustainable sources, that don't include plastic where you can, and that will have a long lifespan that your school or district can use later.
But especially whenever people are talking about rain. I know here in the Bay Area, we have rain that comes from the side. So I love the gazebo store and the carport store, but I just know that as soon as the rains come, that wouldn't work as much for us. But if it,
Sorry, the gazebos and the carports do have sides that you can get. The idea is not to keep them enclosed though. So I think you probably wouldn't want to put more than 1 or 2 sides on an outdoor structure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, and we are trying to get, personally, I love the carport idea. I think it's a lot sturdier than the tents, and I don't know that those are yet permitted by the Division of State Architect in California, but I would love to see if that was possible. Because they seem to be a lot, stronger for longer use.
Karen, if you want to unmute yourself and tell us where you're from.
She may not be there at her computer anymore. Or if you are, Karen, you're on mute. All right, John, you good? Shall I move on?
Move on. Yeah.
Okay. I think actually the remaining questions in this column, a lot of them are around teacher confidence, teacher training, and the good news is we have a webinar coming on September 16th about outdoor instruction, preparing teachers for that, and strategies that work well for teaching outdoors, particularly with COVID restrictions like social distancing. So I think we can save those for that time. John, do you feel okay about that?
Yep. Yep.
All right.
The technology, do you want to take the technology one real quick?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think there are schools that have been installing outdoor Wi-Fi. That's possible. But there also is frequently, many schools have programs that are hybrid still with half online and half in person. And so one thought is to consider how curriculum can be split by the teacher so that the part that requires online access and ability to use a computer is on the days that the kids are home, and that the hands-on learning and discussion-oriented pieces of the curriculum happen when they're in person on site. And so that reduces the need to do outdoor Wi-Fi, and to be able to see a screen when it's bright.
Great, thanks, Sharon. Well, and with that, I just want to share as a teacher and a mother, I've thought a lot about kids going back to school and coming back to, masks and plexiglass and sanitizer, and I'm so inspired. Sharon, thank you so much for this opportunity to also envision a school they would come back to with a COVID adaptation that is absolutely welcome, child-friendly, exciting for them, good for their social emotional well-being. I find this really, really inspiring at a time when we need inspiration. So I really appreciate everything you've shared, Sharon, and that you continue to share on your website, and all of you in the audience for participating and investing your time in this idea. It gives me hope, and I'm so grateful, and just can't thank you all enough. We can do it together. So thanks, everybody. Wonderful to be together today, and we look forward to staying in touch through the network. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for coming, everyone.
John, you have anything?
No, just letting people put in their last comments. There's always a little flurry of chat at the end, but we'll close it out in a couple seconds.
Awesome. Thank you.